Zara Chen stood at the viewport of Outpost Station 47, watching the slow dance of maintenance drones against the backdrop of the Carina Nebula. Her calloused fingers absently traced the worn edge of her station badge, a habit she'd developed over 3 years of self-imposed exile from Earth's bustling spaceports. The outpost's isolation suited her. No bureaucrats, no regulations, just honest engineering work keeping the station's ancient systems running. The station's AI chimed softly. Engineer Chen, an unscheduled vessel is requesting emergency docking clearance. Configuration unknown. Zara straightened, her military training surfacing despite years of disuse. Unknown configuration. Show me. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a ship unlike anything she'd seen in 15 years of space engineering. Its hull seemed to ripple like liquid metal, with no visible propulsion systems or external hardware. It was beautiful, elegant, and completely impossible by human engineering standards. Biographical scan complete, the AI announced. 1 occupant. Species. Archival. Designation. Diplomatic course. Zara's heart rate quickened. The archival were the galaxy's self-appointed record keepers, chroniclers of technological advancement across known space. They didn't make emergency stops at backwater human stations. They didn't make emergency stops anywhere. Permission to dock granted, she said, already moving toward the airlock. Prep med bay as a precaution. The alien ship docked with impossible precision, barely a tremor running through the station's deck plates. The airlock cycled, and Zara found herself face to face with an archival diplomat. The being stood nearly 7 feet tall, its crystalline body structure refracting the station's lights in mesmerizing patterns. Like all archival, it possessed multiple sensory clusters that humans typically interpreted as eyes, though xenobiologists insisted they were something far more complex. Engineer Zara Chen. The archival's translation matrix produced perfect standard English, with an oddly warm tone. I am Kelrix, 3rd Archivist of the Temporal Sciences Division. I require your assistance with a matter of grave importance. Zara crossed her arms. I'm a maintenance engineer on a forgotten outpost. Whatever you need, there are thousands of better qualified humans in the core systems. No, Kelrix's crystalline structure shifted, producing a sound like wind chimes. I require you specifically. Our archives indicate you were the engineer who solved the Ganymede Cascade failure. The memory hit her like a physical blow. 5 years ago, Jupiter's largest moon had faced catastrophic orbital decay. The official solution had come from Earth's finest minds, but it had been Zara's unauthorized, impossible fix, involving mining explosives and precise gravitational calculations that actually saved the moon and its 3 million inhabitants. It had also ended her career in the Earth Space Corps. That's classified information, she said carefully. And illegal. Indeed, which is precisely why I need someone willing to attempt the impossible. Kelrix moved closer, its crystalline body dimming to match the station's lighting. We face a crisis that defies all known physical laws. Conventional solutions have failed. We require human innovation. The way Kelrix said human innovation carried a mixture of desperate hope and barely concealed distaste. Zara had heard that tone before, from other alien species. To them, humans were brilliant savages, creatures who achieved spaceflight while still fighting with projectile weapons, who solved complex problems with concerning disregard for proper procedures. Tell me about this crisis, Zara found herself saying, curiosity overriding caution. Kelrix produced a holographic display, showing a massive structure floating in space. This is the Mnemoscene Archive, our most ancient repository of knowledge. 3 standard days ago, it began exhibiting quantum temporal instability. In 16 days, it will collapse, taking 3 inhabited systems with it. And your solutions? Failed. The Archive's quantum matrix is locked in a paradox state our technology cannot address. We need. Kelrix's translation matrix seemed to struggle. We need someone who can think incorrectly. Zara laughed despite herself. You mean you need someone who can think outside your very expensive, very logical box. Crudely put, but accurate. Kelrick's body brightened slightly. Your species excels at finding solutions that should not work, yet somehow do. The Ganymede incident is merely one example among thousands. You achieve the impossible through what our scholars can only term as educated recklessness. Zara studied the hologram, her mind already racing through possibilities. The archive structure reminded her of ancient Earth lighthouses. If lighthouses were built by beings who could manipulate quantum states as easily as humans worked with steel, the engineering principles might be vastly different. But physics was physics, and problems were meant to be solved. I'll need full access to your technical specifications, she said finally. And we do this my way. No committees, no oversight boards. That would violate 17 different protocols, Kelrick noted, its crystalline structure vibrating with what might have been anxiety. Exactly. Zara smiled. Welcome to human innovation, archivist. Rule 1. Sometimes you have to break protocol to fix what's broken. The station's lights flickered, as if emphasizing her words. Beyond the viewport, the nebula's colors shifted, painting the scene in shades of red and gold. Zara felt the familiar surge of excitement that came with an impossible problem to solve. Kelrick's translation matrix was silent for a long moment. The protocols exist for good reason, Engineer Chen. Our methods ensure stability, predictability, safety. And when those methods fail, Zara gestured to the hologram. Look, your archive is about to take out 3 star systems. You came to me because you need something unpredictable, something that breaks the rules. That's what humans do best. The archival's crystalline structure produced a sound like sighing glass. Perhaps that is precisely what we need. You will have your access, Engineer Chen. The fate of 3 systems now rests on human innovation. Zara grabbed her toolkit, already mentally cataloging what she'd need. First rule of human engineering, Kelrick. Don't call it innovation. Call it what it is, creative problem-solving with a healthy dose of controlled chaos. As they headed toward the alien ship, Zara couldn't help but smile. The universe was about to get a crash course in human ingenuity, whether it was ready or not. Kelrick's ship moved through space like a dream, its quantum drive making conventional faster-than-light travel look primitive by comparison. Zara sat in what she assumed was the passenger compartment, surrounded by holographic displays showing the archive's deteriorating condition. Walk me through exactly what happened, she said, studying the complex quantum matrices that made up the archive's core systems. From the beginning. The archival's crystalline form shifted colors as it accessed its memory. The archive was performing its standard millennial data restructuring when we detected the first anomaly. A temporal echo in the quantum substrate, something that should be impossible given our containment protocols. Nothing's impossible, Zara muttered, enlarging a section of the hologram. Just improbable until proven otherwise. The display showed cascading failures across the archive systems, but something wasn't adding up. The quantum fluctuations weren't random. They followed a pattern, like waves in a pond. Has anyone tried treating this like a resonance problem? Resonance. Kelrick's translation matrix seemed to struggle with the concept. The archive operates on quantum principles. Sound waves are irrelevant. Zara suppressed a smile. For all their advanced technology, the archival could be remarkably linear in their thinking. Everything vibrates. Kelrick's. Quantum states, sound waves, light. They're all just different forms of energy moving through space. What if your temporal echo is creating a feedback loop? She manipulated the hologram, highlighting the wave patterns. Look, every failure follows the same progression. It's like dropping a stone in water, except the ripples are moving through time instead of space. Fascinating. Kelrick moved closer, its crystalline structure refracting the hologram's light. But even if your analysis is correct, how does this help us prevent the collapse? On Earth, we had something called the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. In 1940, it collapsed because wind created a resonance frequency that matched the bridge's natural oscillation. The solution wasn't to fight the wind. It was to change the bridge's frequency. You propose we alter the fundamental quantum frequency of a structure that contains millions of years of accumulated knowledge. Kelrick's tone carried equal parts horror and intrigue. The risks would be astronomical, higher or lower than letting 3-star systems get wiped out. Zara countered. She pulled up more technical data, her mind racing. Look, your containment protocols are trying to force the archive back into its normal state. But what if that's making things worse? Like pushing a swing at exactly the wrong moment. The ship's interior shifted slightly, adjusting to their conversation. Kelrick's remained silent for several moments, its crystalline form pulsing with what Zora had learned to recognize as intense calculation. Your analogy has merit, it finally admitted. But the archive's quantum matrix is not a simple mechanical system. It exists in multiple temporal states simultaneously. Then we change multiple frequencies at once. Zara stood up, pacing as she thought. We need something that can generate opposing quantum waves, like noise-canceling headphones, but for time itself. What you're suggesting? Kelrick's translation matrix struggled again. It would require technology we don't possess. The energy requirements alone would be beyond our capability to generate. Zara stopped pacing, a dangerous smile forming on her face. What about a gravity wave? Massive enough to affect quantum states, but generated through conventional means. Impossible, Kelrick stated flatly. The precision required would be impossible with your technology, Zara agreed. But humans have been brute-forcing gravity since we first learned to split the atom. Remember Ganymede? Sometimes the crude solution is the right one. She pulled up a new holographic workspace, sketching out rough calculations. We need to create a gravity wave that matches the archive's temporal frequency, but in opposite phase, like pushing that swing at exactly the right moment to make it stop. Using what source? Kelrick asked, its tone suggesting it already feared the answer. Mining charges, lots of them, arranged in a precise pattern and detonated in sequence. Zora looked up from her calculations. The explosion would create a gravity wave that could theoretically interact with the archive's quantum matrix. Theoretically, Kelrick repeated. And if your calculations are wrong, then we accelerate the collapse, and I die knowing I tried something spectacularly stupid. Zora shrugged. But if I'm right, the gravity wave will force the archive's quantum state back into normal alignment. The temporal echo gets canceled out. The feedback loop breaks, and 3-star systems don't get erased from existence. The ship's interior dimmed slightly, matching Kelrick's troubled crystalline hue. Your species' willingness to attempt such dangerous solutions is concerning. It's not willingness, Zara corrected, still working on calculations. It's necessity. Humans learned early that sometimes you have to take big risks to solve big problems. We call it having the courage of your convictions. And if your convictions are wrong, then we learn from the failure and try something else. Zora looked up at the archival. That's another thing about humans. We're stubborn. We don't stop until we solve the problem or die trying. Kelrick's crystalline structure produced a sound like chimes in a storm. The Archives Council will never approve such a dangerous attempt. You didn't bring me here for their approval, Zora pointed out. You brought me here because you need someone willing to try the impossible. So are we doing this my way, or should we start evacuating those 3-star systems? The ship's interior brightened slightly, and Zara could have sworn she saw something like respect in Kelrick's crystalline patterns. Your way, Engineer Chen. Though I suspect I will regret this decision, regardless of the outcome. That's the spirit, Zara grinned, expanding her calculations into a full 3-dimensional model. Now about those mining charges. How do you feel about a little unofficial requisitioning? The mining facility on Proxima VI was everything Zara remembered about frontier operations. Noisy, dirty, and gloriously chaotic. She stood in the facility's main storage bay, surrounded by enough explosives to level a small continent, while Kelrick's crystalline form shifted through various shades of anxiety. This quantity of mining charges exceeds all safety protocols, the archival noted, its translation matrix struggling to maintain composure. The regulatory implications alone are less important than saving 3-star systems. Zora finished, checking the charge specifications. Besides, we're not stealing them. We're borrowing them with an extremely good excuse. She turned to the facility's supervisor, a burly woman named Martinez, who had listened to their explanation with remarkable calm. So, what do you say? Can you help us save the galaxy? Martinez chewed her lip thoughtfully. Let me get this straight. You want to use my mining charges to create a precisely calculated gravity wave that will stabilize a quantum-locked alien archive. That's the simple version, yes. And if it doesn't work, we all die in a temporal cascade that erases 3-star systems from existence. Also yes. Martinez grinned. Finally, something interesting happens in this sector. I'm in, but I want to help set the charges. Kelrick's crystalline structure produced a sound like shattering glass. This is not a mining operation. The precision required is exactly why we need her. Zara interrupted. Who better to help place explosives than someone who does it for a living? She pulled up the holographic model she'd been refining during their journey. Look, the charges need to be arranged in this pattern. Each detonation has to be timed to the microsecond to generate the correct wave formation. One mistake, and we make things worse instead of better. Martinez studied the model, her expression turning serious. These timing calculations, they're accounting for quantum temporal displacement. You understand quantum mechanics? Kelrick asked, surprise evident in its tone. Lady, I'd blow up asteroids for a living, Martinez replied. You think we don't factor in quantum effects when we're fragmenting rocks bigger than cities? Amateur hour over here with the million-year-old archive. Zara couldn't help but laugh at Kelrick's obvious confusion. The archival, like many advanced species, tended to underestimate human technological understanding. They saw the crude tools and assumed crude minds. Here's what I'm thinking, Martinez continued, manipulating the hologram. We use the new XJ7 charges instead of the standard ones. Better precision on the detonation timing, and the blast pattern is more controllable. We'll need to adjust the spacing here and here. She highlighted several points in the model to account for the different yield, but it should give us a cleaner gravity wave. Zara studied the modifications. That's actually better than my original calculations. The wave formation would be almost perfect. Almost isn't good enough, Kelrick interjected. The margin for error is still better than watching 3 systems die. Martinez cut in. Look, crystalline wonder, I get that you folks like everything neat and predictable. But out here on the frontier, we work with what we've got, and we make it work right. The mining facility's overhead lights flickered as a distant explosion signaled another asteroid being prepped for processing. Kelrick's form seemed to shrink slightly at the sound. This is madness, the archival declared. We are attempting to solve a quantum-level problem with mining explosives. The Archives Council would never. That's why we're not telling them, Zara and Martinez said simultaneously, then shared a grin. I've got a cargo shuttle we can use, Martinez offered. Officially, we're just moving some charges to the outer belt for a special project, which is technically true. Zara nodded. We'll need about 6 hours to position everything correctly. The Archive's temporal fluctuations are increasing, but we should have enough time if we move now. Humans. Kelrick's translation matrix somehow managed to convey both exasperation and reluctant admiration. You propose to solve this crisis with stolen explosives, unauthorized personnel, and calculations done on mining equipment. Don't forget the part where we're violating about a dozen safety regulations, Martinez added cheerfully, plus whatever laws govern messing with ancient alien archives. But it will work, Zara stated with quiet confidence. Because it has to work, and humans are really good at making impossible things happen when there's no other choice. She turned to Martinez. Get your best demolition crew. People who can follow precise instructions and keep their mouths shut. We're about to make history, assuming we don't accidentally erase it instead. As they began loading charges onto the shuttle, Kelrick's crystalline structure cycled through a rainbow of worried colors. I begin to understand why your species simultaneously fascinates and terrifies most of the galaxy. Just wait until you see what we do for an encore, Zara replied, checking the first load of explosives. Assuming we survive, of course. Martinez laughed. Oh, we'll survive. The paperwork afterward might kill us, but the explosion, that's the easy part. High above them, through the facility's transparent dome, the archive's distant form pulsed with increasing temporal distortion. They had one chance to get this right. But then, Zara thought, one chance was all humans usually needed to do the impossible. Final charge in position. Martinez's voice crackled over the comm. Through her suit's visor, Zara watched the last mining charge drift into place, its guidance thrusters making minute adjustments until it locked into the precise position her calculations demanded. They had created a perfect sphere of explosives around the archive, each charge placed with microscopic precision. The pattern looked deceptively simple, like a child's connect-the-dots puzzle, drawn in 3 dimensions with high explosives. All teams report ready, Zara announced, checking the holographic display projected inside her helmet. Synchronization complete. Detonation sequence loaded. Kelrick's ship hovered at what the archival insisted was a safe distance, though Zara suspected no distance would truly be safe if they failed. The archive's temporal distortions had worsened during their preparations, its once beautiful structure now rippling with waves of probability that hurt to look at directly. Engineer Chen. Kelrick's voice carried an unfamiliar tone. Was that fear? Our sensors indicate the archive's quantum matrix is approaching critical instability. We have perhaps 20 minutes before collapse becomes inevitable. Then we better not waste time second-guessing ourselves. Zara took a deep breath, watching the countdown sequence initialize. Martinez, get your people clear. If this works, the gravity wave will be intense. Already done. We're falling back to minimum safe distance, whatever that means when you're messing with time itself. The mining charges gleamed in the starlight, their positioning forming complex geometric patterns that would focus the blast energy exactly where Zara's calculations said it needed to go. Simple tools used with precise intention, the most human solution possible to an impossible problem. 15 minutes to critical, Kelrick's announced. Engineer Chen, if you have any doubts. Doubts are a luxury we can't afford. Zora's fingers moved across the holographic controls, finalizing the detonation sequence. Making history here, remember. Or erasing it, Martinez added helpfully. The archive pulsed again, and this time Zora saw actual rifts in space-time. Tiny tears in reality that shouldn't have been visible to human eyes. The countdown reached 5 minutes, and warning signals flashed across her helmet display. Quantum cascade accelerating, Kelrick's reported, its normally precise translation matrix showing stress. The archive's containment systems are failing faster than predicted. We have less time then. The transmission dissolved into static as a massive temporal surge rippled outward from the archive. Zara's suit computers went haywire, and for a moment she experienced the nauseating sensation of existing in multiple timelines simultaneously. Well, that's not good, she muttered, fighting down vertigo. New plan. We're doing this now. What? Martinez's voice cut through the static. The timing calculations. Won't matter if we wait too long. Zara's fingers flew across the controls, adjusting the detonation sequence on the fly. The archive's going critical. It's now or never. The risks, Kelrick's began, are better than certainty of failure. Zara took another deep breath. Sometimes you have to roll the hard 6. Martinez, Confirmed charges are still in position. A pause, then. Confirmed. Pattern holding stable despite temporal interference. But Zara, if you rush this, then I'll apologize in whatever timeline we end up in. She activated the final sequence. Detonation in 10 seconds. Clear all channels and pray to whatever you believe in. The countdown felt eternal. Zara watched the numbers tick down, her mind racing through the calculations one last time. The charges would detonate in a precise sequence, creating a gravity wave that would, theoretically, match the archive's temporal frequency in opposite phase, like using dynamite to stop an earthquake. 3, 2, 1. The universe held its breath. Then everything happened at once. The charges detonated in perfect sequence, each explosion feeding into the next in a cascade of controlled destruction. The gravity wave formed exactly as calculated, a ripple in space-time itself visible to human eyes for one impossible moment. It struck the archive's quantum matrix like a hammer hitting a bell. Reality flexed. Zara felt herself existing across multiple timelines again, but this time it was different. She saw versions where the plan failed spectacularly, where it succeeded beyond their wildest hopes, where it did nothing at all. All possibilities existed simultaneously in a quantum superposition of success and failure. Then, with a sound like the universe itself exhaling, reality snapped back into a single timeline. The archive hung in space, its structure no longer rippling with temporal distortions. The quantum matrix stabilized, probability waves collapsing into a single, stable state. Holy shit, Martins breathed. It actually worked. Impossible. Kelrick's voice was barely a whisper. The archive. It's returning to normal parameters. The quantum cascade has been reversed. Zara allowed herself a small smile. Nothing's impossible. Some things just require a more direct approach. Warning alerts still flashed across her helmet display. The gravity wave had done almost as much damage to her suit's systems as the temporal distortions. But they had done it. They had saved 3 star systems with mining explosives and human stubbornness. Engineer Chen. Kelrick's voice had recovered its usual precision. The Archives Council is demanding an explanation. They detected the unauthorized use of explosives in proximity to their most sacred repository of knowledge. Tell them. Zora paused, watching the last echoes of the gravity wave dissipate into space. Tell them that sometimes the most elegant solution is the simplest one. And maybe mention that they might want to update their containment protocols to account for resonance frequencies. Martinez's laugh crackled over the comm. Think they'll give us a medal or try to arrest us? Knowing bureaucrats? Probably both. Zora began plotting a course back to Kelrick's ship. But hey, at least we made the history books. Assuming we didn't accidentally erase them. As they departed, Zara took one last look at the archive. It stood pristine against the stars, no sign remaining of how close it had come to collapse. Sometimes, she reflected, the best solutions were the ones that left no trace they were needed at all. The Archives Council chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, its crystalline walls shifting with stored knowledge and ancient wisdom. Zara stood before the assembled archival elders, trying not to fidget as they reviewed the data from their near-catastrophic brush with destruction. Beside her, Kelrick's maintained a respectful silence, its crystalline form dimmed to match the formal atmosphere. Let us be clear, the chief archivist's translation matrix conveyed carefully controlled incredulity. You prevented the cascade failure by detonating mining explosives in a precisely calculated pattern around our most sacred repository of knowledge. Yes, Zara replied simply. No point in sugarcoating it now. The gravity wave disrupted the temporal resonance that was causing the quantum matrix to destabilize. Using technology that, by our standards, is barely more advanced than striking rocks together, another council member noted. Martinez, standing at Zara's other side, failed to completely suppress a snort. Those rocks just saved 3 star systems, so maybe a little respect for primitive solutions. The chamber fell silent, its walls briefly flickering with what might have been surprise or amusement. It was hard to tell with archival architecture. The chief archivist's crystalline form shifted through several colors before settling on a deep blue. "What interests us most," it said finally, "is not the method itself, but the reasoning behind it. Your species saw a quantum-level problem and solved it with physical forces. It is counterintuitive. Humans often are," Kelrix offered. "Their strength lies not in their technology, but in their ability to apply simple solutions to complex problems." Zara smiled slightly. "We have a saying. Sometimes the best tool for the job is a bigger hammer." "A crude metaphor," the chief archivist observed, "but perhaps apt. We have spent millennia advancing our technology, pursuing ever more elegant solutions. In doing so, we may have overlooked more direct approaches." The chamber's walls rippled with data streams, displaying the events of the past few days from multiple angles. Zara watched the explosion sequence again, still amazed it had worked as perfectly as it had. "The archive contains the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 species," another council member spoke. "Yet none of them would have attempted your solution. The risks were astronomical." "The risks of doing nothing were worse," Martins pointed out. "Sometimes you have to gamble big to win big, gambling with the preservation of knowledge." The council member's tone suggested this was nearly blasphemous. "No," Zora corrected, "gambling on our ability to solve the problem. Humans don't see impossible situations. We see challenges that haven't been solved yet." The chief archivist's form brightened suddenly. "Perhaps that is why your species progresses so rapidly despite your technological limitations. You are not bound by conventional wisdom or established protocols." "We're bound by them," Zura said. "We just choose to ignore them when they get in the way of doing what needs to be done." A sound like crystalline laughter filled the chamber. "And therein lies the paradox of humanity. You achieve the impossible precisely because you refuse to accept that it is impossible." The council members conferred briefly in their native language, their crystalline forms creating complex harmonies that the translation matrix didn't even attempt to interpret. Finally, the chief archivist turned back to them. "We have reached a decision. Engineer Chen, in recognition of your service to the archive and the 3 systems you saved, we offer you a position as special consultant on human innovation." Zara blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "We believe there may be value in having a human perspective on certain, challenging problems. Your species' unique approach to problem-solving could prove invaluable." "And what about the regulations we violated?" Martins asked. "The unauthorized use of explosives, the tampering with ancient alien technology." Sometimes, the chief archivist's translation matrix conveyed what might have been amusement. "Protocols must be adjusted in light of new evidence. We are archivists of knowledge. It would be foolish to ignore a lesson so clearly demonstrated." Kelrix's form brightened with what Zora had learned to recognize as pride. "I told you humans would surprise us, honored ones." "Indeed." The chief archivist turned back to Zora. "Do you accept our offer, Engineer Chen?" Zora looked around the chamber, at the wealth of knowledge stored in its walls, at the beings who had spent millennia collecting and preserving it. Then she thought about the elegant solution they'd found using mining explosives and human stubbornness. "On one condition," she said finally. "Martinez gets to be my assistant. Someone needs to keep the explosives organized." "Done." The chief archivist agreed immediately. "Though perhaps we should establish some new safety protocols regarding the storage of mining charges near ancient artifacts." "Probably wise," Zora agreed, then grinned. "But let's keep them flexible. You never know when you might need to save the galaxy with some well-placed explosions." As the chamber filled with crystalline laughter, Zara felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced since her days in the Earth Space Corps. The universe was vast and full of impossible problems waiting to be solved. And now, thanks to some mining charges and human ingenuity, those problems would be faced with a new perspective, one that understood sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. even if it involved blowing things up to make them work better.